Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 395 for the 15th of May 2016. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. The weather has changed. Winter is coming. Sounds like a Game of Thrones, doesn't it? Winter is coming, I'm pleased to say, because I do enjoy the colder weather, dressing up in nice, rugging up sort of winter gear. But enough about the weather. What's coming up on today's show? We're going to be talking about quackery in chemist shops, pharmacies, drugstores. Yes, when you go to get your aspirin and things that really work, you can also pick up a bottle of magic, quackery, homeopathy, that sort of thing. A report about quackery in pharmacies coming up to start off the Skeptic Zone. Then we join Maynard for Maynard's Spooky Action. Today, Maynard's going to be interviewing a guy well known to Triple J listeners in Australia, that's the Triple J radio network, known as the Doctor. Not the Doctor from the BBC. No, this guy was an announcer on Triple J by the name of Lindsay McDougall. Now, Maynard and I bumped into Lindsay. He was giving a talk at the Podcasting Sydney meetup group the other night, which was very interesting. Hello to Siobhan, who runs that, and her podcast, Knowing Animals. But we'll find out what the Doctor, Lindsay McDougall, thinks of skepticism and his skeptical attitudes towards things. And following that, it's a quick promo for Maynard's podcast, Bunga Bunga. Yes, Maynard does have a life outside the Skeptic Zone, I'm pleased to say, and he and Tim Ferguson make this wonderful podcast funny, insightful, funny, Bunga Bunga. Then to round off the show, it's an update about the University of Wollongong awarding a PhD on a thesis concerning anti-vaccination conspiracy theories. What were they thinking? Well, that's enough from me. I'm going to run downstairs. I'm not going to raid the fridge this time. I'm going to put together my collection of origami photography, which I enjoy doing. I've got another exhibition coming up at Cafe 2042 in Newtown here in Sydney. And if you're in Newtown and you drop by the Cafe 2042 in King Street, you'll be able to see an exhibition of some of my work. Well, I might grab a cookie on the way. Well, I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Lately in the news here in Australia, we've noticed there's a push for naturopaths to be more prominent in pharmacies. Now, this problem has been ongoing for many years. I well remember the time Zone reporter and prominent skeptic Dr. Rachel Dunlop and I went into a pharmacy to ask for some advice. Can't quite remember what it was. I think we were looking for flu injection or something like that, a flu shot. Nevertheless, somebody came up and offered to help us, and then began telling us that the homeopathic range that they were selling was really based on science, and when we pressed her on that, she got rather short with us. They don't like being asked questions. Which brings me to a story by Jane Hansen, published on the 8th of May at thedailytelegraph.com.au, entitled Employing Naturopaths in Chemists, Akin to McDonald's Style, Do You Want Fries With That? Marketing. And Jane says that pharmacists have blasted attempts by the vitamin and supplement industry to employ naturopaths in chemists as a sales gimmick and fear it will diminish the credibility of their profession. Well, she's absolutely right. It already has. It already does. People go into pharmacies or in this country, and you would expect real advice, based on scientific evidence. People treat pharmacies as an extension of our system of scientific medicine. Those of you in Australia, just walk into your nearest big pharmacy and you'll probably find homeopathy. Some pharmacists I've noticed were selling snoring rings based on acupressure points. The infamous power band range of those bands that you used to put on your wrist. I bought one example called the Hot Band from a pharmacy, believe it or not. These are the plastic things with holograms in them. So sadly, a lot of pharmacies, chemist shops do sell a lot of woo. Jane goes on to say that Ian Carr, a Taree-based pharmacist, Taree is a city in New South Wales, said that he was dismayed by the trend of naturopaths employed by supplement companies and pharmacists who work as in-store consultants. He said many supplements were not evidence-based and didn't do what they claimed. Well, he's got that right. Quote, "I'm going to campaign against the placement of naturopaths in-store because its message is contrary to the dispensing side, and I don't want to mislead clients with nonsense like naturopathy. Historically, we have always had vitamins as a healthy line to sell, but now we have greater access to evidence-based information, and we are in a position to say, no, vitamin B will not give you more energy, and glucosamine is questionable for arthritis," end quote, he said. Research by Roy Morgan shows that in 2015, 8.1 million Australians bought vitamins or supplements in any given 6-month period, 1.5 million more than the same period in 2011. The industry is now worth $3.1 billion. Yes, there's big money to be made in selling supplements, questionable supplements, because largely they're being sold through pharmacies, and people, again, equate something being sold in a pharmacy with something that should be real, evidence-based. Maybe don't even think that far. At least real, at least it should work. Jane goes on to say, nearly half of all women buy supplements and more than a third of all men, despite there being little evidence of their benefit. I remember that when I went to a pharmacy and I saw this snoring ring you put on your finger. Presses the acupressure point and stops you snoring. And I had a chat to the nice lady behind the counter, and I said, I don't think there's any evidence that these things really work, and the point they press is non-existent. And she said, quite honestly, we sell them because they sell. People want them. The story goes on. Last week, vitamin and supplement giant Blackmores advertised for naturopaths to join the, quote, in-store health and well-being team, end quote, across key Sydney pharmacies. Dr. Leslie Braun, the director of Blackmores Institute, said pharmacies were a key destination for complementary medicines. Oh dear. Quote, "Many pharmacies are supplementing the expertise of the pharmacist with a qualified naturopath in-store to provide additional advice on appropriate complementary medicine as well as diet and lifestyle information," end quote. Dr. Braun rejected criticism and said a Pharmacy Guild survey of 700 pharmacists found that half would employ a naturopath. I don't know what to say to that. Quote, "Interestingly, the Guild report goes on to explain that 65% of pharmacy customers taking complementary medicines, that is Australian consumers, think it's important for a naturopath to be available in a pharmacy," end quote. She said, quote, "It is entirely reasonable for pharmacists to seek the assistance of an appropriately qualified naturopath in delivering quality information onto their customers," end quote. But Mr. Carr said pharmacies were selling supplements to try and claw back profits that had diminished with medications that had come off patent. Another side note, many years ago, 2004, my good friend Phil Plait, known as the Bad Astronomer, who appears on the Skeptic Zone from time to time, made his first visit to Australia, and I remember collecting him from the airport, a bit jet-lagged. He was very happy to be here. And we had a nice coffee not far from where I live, nice little cafe. Then we strolled across the street to the pharmacy where he wanted to pick up sundry items, I guess. And there was this weird sort of machine in there with a screen and buttons where you could ask questions, press the appropriate button to get health advice. And one of the bits of advice it was dispensing via the screen was to recommend a certain homeopathic treatment for burns. Now, we were both pretty gobsmacked. I wonder if those machines are still about. I haven't seen one for a long time. Homeopathic treatment for burns in a pharmacy. That says a lot, I think. We read on. In 2011, the Pharmacy Guild was pilloried for striking a deal with Blackmores akin to a, quote, "Do you want fries with that?" end quote, McDonald's-style marketing push. The Guild, which represents 94% of Australia's 5,450 pharmacists, ditched the deal. There you go. The president of the Australian Medical Association, Dr. Brian Aller, said pharmacists need to reevaluate their professional roles. Quote, "These things run the risk of diminishing the professional reputation of pharmacists and suggest they are more of a shop rather than a place to seek advice about medicines," end quote, he said. Good point. Greg Turnbull, spokesman for the Pharmacy Guild of Australia, said if members employed complementary therapists, they should, quote, "be mindful of their duty of care and responsibility for any advice or service provided within their pharmacy," end quote. And that comes to us from Jane Hansen, who I do quote from time to time on the Skeptic Zone. She is quite active in her condemnation as a reporter of the anti-vaccination brigade, mob, group, crew, as we like to say, those zany, wacky people at the anti-vaccination crowd. So there you go. And maybe this is the same situation in your country or your part of Australia, that pharmacies, chemist shops, not only dispense sound advice and medicines that really work, but also what we might loosely call woo. Those of you in the UK, I think, know especially what I'm talking about. In fact, the last time I was in the UK, when I attended the QED convention in Manchester, I went into a Boots pharmacy and I bought myself a nice vial of homeopathic, what was it now, sleeping pills or something like that. But for many years, and there's a video online, in fact, I'll link to it in the show notes. There is a video online from the 2004 Australian Skeptics Convention where I and a group of prominent skeptics, including Dr. Phil Plait, guzzled many homeopathic sleeping tablets. But people do this all around the world. James Randi's been doing this for many years. And in fact, part of the 1023 campaign initiated by people like Michael Marshall at Merseyside Skeptics. Well, that's all about consuming large amounts of homeopathic pills. What can we do about it? Well, I'm not sure. I think the wheels are in motion. They have been in motion for a long time. More and more people are realizing this stuff is woo, but at the same time, more and more people are probably using it anyway. It's the it's the classic tale. It's the Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes. It's the Superman and Lex Luthor, the Batman and the Joker. Now, what side is what? Well, I guess that's up to you. Credit to Jane Hansen for that report, and you can read her reports at dailytelegraph.com.au.
Hi. This is Cassandra, president of the Brisbane Skeptic Society in sunny Queensland, which, well, by Sydney standards, is the north side of Australia. I'd like to invite you to join us at one of our many events. Not only do we have weekly social gatherings all over Brisbane and monthly lectures, we get along so well that once or twice a year we escape our city confines in Brisbane and go traveling together. We're always on the lookout for new ideas, new perspectives, and definitely new speakers. Want to find out more? Please visit us at www.brisbaneskeptics.org or search for Brisbane Skeptic Society on Facebook or Twitter. We hope to see you soon.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Oh, look, it's just a hub. There's a bit of a deep hub going on down here at the moment, and it's a bit like a shadowy cabal is planning something down here, isn't it, Mr. Lindsay?
Yeah, or we've arrived at the end of like a really long party. Like we're in the nightclub, It's 4 a.m, everyone's left, and the only people that are left are the people that are just all scattered from not being awake for too long. That's what it's like.
Distinctly what it feels like. Could you please introduce yourself to the Skeptic Zone audience?
My name's Lindsay McDougall. I play guitar in Frenzal Rhomb, and much like Maynard, I had a stint on Triple J.
And the great thing is, his nickname is the Doctor, which means you've got a prescription pad on you at all times, haven't you?
If only. I do know people that do have these kind of things, but I haven't. But these days, the regulations, back in the day, I'm sure, Maynard, you would have some...
Look, if you can write anything that's in S4, I'll take no problem at all.
I don't know what that is. It shows that you've lived a better life than me.
That's a positive thing. But we've been here at the Sydney Podcasters and chatting to you about it. And in chatting, you're actually quite the skeptic, aren't you?
Well, I come from a position. I'm not just one of those, I guess I'm a born-again skeptic.
Oh, okay.
So I was brought up quite religious. I went to a Catholic school. I played in the church group, which was an excellent way to meet girls. I used to be tough and say, yeah, I did it to meet girls, but I didn't. I also did it because that's how you got into heaven or whatever.
Like any ex-Catholic, have you shaken off the guilt thing completely, or did the whole veganism come from the guilt thing in the first place?
I'm sure. When I joined Frenzal Rhomb, Jason was brought up Anglican, but also atheist. He used to make jokes about the Catholic guilt, but I never knew it as a thing. I think my parents weren't all that big into it wasn't the big sort of, sparing the rod kind of Catholic guilt thing, Catholic upbringing. Although there was lots of talks about death and stuff, but I don't think I felt the guilt, but then people have told me subsequently that I have. I don't know. But also my mum owned a health food shop and got into health foods because I was very allergic to things growing up. Couldn't eat the same fruit 2 days in a row. I was that kind of allergy. Full-on hyperactivity and skin conditions and stuff. And so Mum got into health food, got into food combining, which helped settle some of that stuff. And then she went further down that rabbit hole into the esoteric world of kinesiology, homeopathy, all the G's that I'm sure you guys like to talk about on the Skeptic Zone quite a lot, and things like channeling. I spoke to a channel once, but she did it in a way. I spoke to a channel who would channel various past lives, or I guess other people from the beyond, to talk about my food allergies.
And how would this help in any way? Would Sir Isaac Newton have some things to say?
He probably would. Stay away from apples.
Wow. Okay. This is really. I
don't know this. I don't know the science behind it. Probably for a very good reason.
I'm rarely speechless, but that's one time I've never heard of that being used for allergies.
Absolutely, for health conditions. My mum took me to a channel. And I don't remember what she told me. I imagine it was just a combination of food-related things. I didn't have to... There was no... I wasn't reaching across the other side for a cure. She was just drawing on her various skills, her particular skill set or whatever.
Now, as a vegan, on balance, is Morrissey a plus or a minus to the vegan cause?
So many worse vegans than Morrissey. At the end of it all, you can just block out the silly things he says, to delve into various racist things and monarchist things. At the point, I think people like him, and when people can whinge about people like him, and there's lots of other, you just go, he was in the Smiths, mate. He's been saying in the Smiths.
So shut up.
So shut up. Exactly right. So many people get a hall pass because of the amazing music they've written.
As a vegan, how do you feel about his hammer-over-the-head approach, like he does live with Meat is Murder, where he shows quite violent scenes on the screen that are all real?
Yeah, I think that people should be exposed to that stuff, and I don't think people go to a Morrissey gig unprepared. There are probably not too many Morrissey fans these days that think, I might just pop along to this guy I've heard, Morrissey. I'll go straight from McDonald's to there. So that's fine. I like when people do things like that. They use their giant star power, like when K.D. Lang cancelled a gig at a casino maybe 15 years ago because she could smell meat coming out of the kitchen, although she probably should have prepared a little bit earlier and sent them a nice email. But I think it's certainly not their duty to do that. And I would never say, you must, as a vegan, always appear po-faced and sing about about the horrifics of the animal industry. But if they get to do that just once in a while, and maybe a few people, there'll be the people that stick their finger up at him, but there's also the other people that go, oh, this guy that I really like's into this other thing, I might pursue it further, then it's kind of nice.
And with your travels with Triple J, with Band, with extreme veganism from time to time, you've also been exposed to a few theories along the way. You mentioned that people often think, oh, well, you'll be down with the whole chemtrails thing, and you're not exactly, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's a problem that happens in any open-minded group, I think. That people think, you're into veganism, you're into health food, so, what do you think about the government trying to control us with the fluoride in the water and stuff, and just things that are so easily disprovable. I mean, I don't know.
Have you got a pet one that you hate?
I hate the fluoride one because I've heard it recently from a friend of mine who was talking to my friends bringing up kids and advocating for only bottled water, and I just like... Just look at the facts. I mean, just go across the border and look at people's teeth in Queensland who are about 30 or 40 years old. They didn't have the fluoride.
I did a pretty simple thing while I was waiting for my dentist the other day. I just said to the dental assistant, could you explain to me the action of how fluoride in the water works to help your teeth? And she went, no one's ever asked that. And she then fully explained to me how it works with the saliva and everything and the cycle, and it all became very clear. Just do that, people.
Yeah, ask that question and also be prepared to believe the answer. I mean, the horrible thing about vaccines causing autism, which still is a belief, which is ridiculous, because of this one discredited, you know the story, discredited paper gets, now Robert De Niro's banging it at film festivals. Poor guy. He's old. He doesn't know. People get worried.
And also, I imagine, having a child with that condition, you get a bit going, maybe I haven't been thinking wide enough, and you think a bit too wide.
Exactly, because you want to do the right thing for your kids, for your loved ones, or for your friends, so you want to entertain every possibility. And sadly, the internet is a beautiful world full of so many incorrect theories and websites absolutely dedicated to them. A good tip, though, is if the website has got the font that goes, got the text that goes right across the screen,
with a black background,
with photos that scroll up and down the side and flashing things, it's probably conspiracy. But it's great to read. If you had a couple of wines or want to go through some of those YouTube channels, it's a lot of fun. Just don't believe it.
Look, you've been a guest on Knowing Animals. I recommend people go and listen to the next Knowing Animals podcast. And I'll just finish on one last question. If there was one type of woo, if there was one type of conspiracy theory, if there was one that you would like to be real, if you'd want it to be real, which one would it be of all the things?
It's easy, Maynard. It's the lizard people. Why wouldn't you want
the David Icke stuff?
Just that specific one. I don't care what the moon's made of. That stuff can go. I just want the people in control of the world to actually be shape-shifting lizard people, because it would be beautiful. I would love to know that the worst people in the world weren't humans, thus completely absolving me of any guilt as being of the same species of them, and it would make those YouTube clips where they pause and zoom in on the people's eyes when you can see the filament click going across their eyes. It would make that, like, if that turned out to be true, I'd be like, I'm fine with that. I'm happy to bow down to my lizard kings.
And where can we catch up with your website and your podcast?
I'll be at Bohemian Grove or at Dr. McDougall on Twitter, Dr. McDougall on Instagram, or Lindsay McDougall on Facebook.
And can we get your stuff on all over the place on iTunes? Are you just on Frenzal Rhomb, or are you solo there as well?
Frenzal Rhomb is most of the stuff. I did put out an album with Jason from Frenzal Rhomb. The album, we called ourselves the Self-Righteous Brothers, and it's acoustic, and it's really some of the lyrical themes are horrific. So you should really listen to that. The album's called Love Songs for the Wrong at Heart by the Self-Righteous Brothers, and it is on most streaming and download services.
On Maynard.com.au. This is Bunga Bunga 26. In today's show, we'll have some news. We'll answer your crank mail.
Do you get the crank mail?
No.
We'll have a burning social issue. Yeah! And Tim will solve the problems of Australia once again.
The thing that really irritates me about having multiple sclerosis is the suggestions from complete strangers as to what I should be doing and taking.
Are these normally from people who haven't got the condition as well?
Of course, because the people who have the condition know that nothing works. So thank you very much for your cures for the incurable, but maybe you should take a look at your own teeth before you start throwing new cures around. And to those chiropractors who chiropractify babies, I will see you in lockup, baby. I will see you in the lockup.
With Tim Ferguson and Maynard here in Bunga Bunga 26. Please go to the Bunga Bunga Facebook page, go to Planet Maynard and put that into your podcast receiver and you'll get it whenever you do on maynard.com.au. Hey, you!
Once again, we head to the webpage of the Australian Skeptics, skeptics.com.au. There are a lot of very interesting articles at this website, including the full back library of the journal from Australian Skeptics called The Skeptic, been in publication since 1981. So thousands upon thousands of articles, interviews, reviews, investigations, free for you to download as PDFs going right back. However, this particular one, published on the 11th of May, written by Tim Mendham, concerns a story we have been keeping track of here on the Skeptic Zone. Some weeks ago, we spoke to our reporter Dr. Rachie about this very subject, and this is all about the University of Wollongong giving out or awarding a PhD based more or less on conspiracy theories when it comes to vaccines. Conflict among Wilyman PhD examiners is the title. Details have come to light about the examiners' assessments of Judy Wilyman's anti-vaccination PhD thesis at the University of Wollongong with, quote, serious concerns and very critical, end quote, comments made about the anti-vaccination document that claims pro-vaccination conspiracies on a global scale. Wilyman has taken a leading anti-vaccination role for some time, including presentations at anti-vaccination rallies and support of the Australian Anti-Vaccination Skeptics Network, also known as AVN or AVSN. Now, based on documents recently released by the university under a GIPA Freedom of Information request, it has been revealed that one of two unnamed examiners who reviewed the thesis suggested it was definitely not worthy of achieving PhD status and was far more in line with a master's degree level. The examiner expressed, quote, serious concern about the lack of engagement with existing literature and the lack of an appropriate theoretical framework, end quote. They also felt that the thesis showed no evidence that Wilyman conducted original research, nor that it was demonstrated that she had made, quote, a significant contribution to the knowledge of the subject, end quote. In fact, the only areas where the examiner felt Wilyman had met the relevant standards were that it was presented in a manner and level appropriate to the field of research, and the standard was adequate. In other words, it met basic standards of presentation. A second examiner, however, quote, praised the thesis and recommending awarding a PhD without revision, end quote. A university summary of the opinion suggested that the second examiner said it represented, quote, meticulous study, end quote. While the correspondence released is heavily redacted, nowhere in what has been released is there an indication by this examiner that they thought the study was meticulous. In fact, when asked as a matter of course if they had thought the thesis was, quote, outstanding, end quote, and recommended for, quote, special commendation, end quote, they answered, quote, no, end quote. Considering these stark differences, the university decided to ask a third examiner to review the thesis. Of 32 PhD candidates submitted to the Thesis Examination Committee on December 3, 2014, Wilyman was one of the only 3 where a third examiner was required. The third examiner, also unnamed, judged that while the thesis assessed showed Wilyman conducted original research, it did not make a significant contribution to the knowledge of the subject and had no indication of a broad understanding of the discipline within which the work was conducted. and that it was not suitable for publication. They recommended that the thesis be resubmitted and gave, quote, extensive and detailed comments on the areas that needed to be improved, end quote, sharing the same concerns as the earlier critical examiner. The extensive comments made by the third examiner have not been released, but their assessment was described as, quote, very critical, end quote, by Patrick McGivern, senior lecturer in philosophy and head of the Postgraduate Studies, School of Humanities and Social Inquiry at the university. A revised thesis was presented by Wilyman, and only one examiner was asked for their views. The examiner who passed the original thesis without change was regarded as a given. Presumably, the revised version was sent to the third examiner, and that the examiner who had serious concerns was not asked to look at the revised version. This revised version was approved by the third examiner. McGivern told Wilyman's PhD supervisor, Brian Martin, that this was, quote, certainly a welcome result, end quote, perhaps indicating relief that the process was apparently behind them. Wilyman's PhD was approved by the university's Thesis Examination Committee in November 2015. But if the university felt that this was the end of the matter, they did not account for the reaction when the PhD was announced. They suddenly found themselves faced with criticism, disappointment, and even outrage from academics both within the University of Wollongong and elsewhere, concerned members of the public and the media. This criticism continues to this day. The university has defended its decision on the grounds of, quote, academic freedom, despite serious errors and misrepresentations highlighted in the thesis. It has not released the names of the examiners, citing, quote, long-standing policy and practice, end quote, but also that it could have a, quote, detrimental effect on their physical, psychological, or emotional well-being, end quote. In other words, suggesting that the community critical of the PhD may physically attack the examiners, which verges on a libelous depiction of members of that community. The university has not, as yet, responded to the Australian skeptics' inquiries as to whether the awarding of a PhD can be reversed. Wollongong University has been nominated for the Bent Spoon Award by a large and growing number of people. And we'll keep Skeptic Zone listeners up to date as this continuing saga continues. The Darwin skeptics are having their next Skeptics in the Pub on Thursday the 2nd of June at the Palmerston Tavern on Chung Wei Terrace. Join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Darwin Skeptics, or just come down at 6:30 on the night and look for the group with the little table sign that says Darwin Skeptics. That's Darwin Skeptics in the Pub, 2nd of June at the Palmerston Tavern. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. I hope to see some of you soon at the Paracon convention, where I'll be speaking about the $1 Million Challenge and other cash challenges around the world for the first person who can prove they have supernatural or psychic ability. Now, after 50 years, we're still waiting. Will I be booed? Will I be heckled? Will I be given lunch? We'll find out soon. That's at Paracon, coming up at the end of this month. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.